already lost me, but that's besides the point.
You good? Good evening. I'd like to call the special called meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, February 9th, 2026 to order. The city encourages you to review tonight's agenda carefully. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. While the Milton rules allow a speaker to turn in their comment card up until the clerk calls the agenda item, once the agenda item is called, no more comment cards can be accepted. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Be happy to call roll for the February 9th, 2026 special called meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. As the mayor mentioned, if you would like to make a public comment, you are required to complete a public comment card prior to that agenda item being called. All speakers will identify themselves with their name, address, and/or organization before beginning their comment. If you are representing an organization, a notarized affidavit is required stating you have the authority to speak on behalf of that organization. Please review the agenda, and if you'd like to make a comment, please bring your comment cards to me now. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outburst, or dialogue with any person speaking. Anyone in violation may be asked to leave. Mayor and Council, as I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Brian Dolan. It was almost a habit.
I have an easy name.
Whew. Councilmember Brian Dolan.
I am here.
Councilmember Juliet Johnson. Here. Councilmember Carol Crookley.
Here.
Councilmember Jan Jacobus.
Present.
And Councilmember Phil Kramer.
Here.
Mayor, Councilmember Doug Haney is joining us via Zoom. Councilmember Haney, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you.
And Mayor, you have a quorum. Everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And next is approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have an executive session, Steve? Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Cranmer and a second from Councilmember Jacobus to approve the meeting agenda. Is the voting open, Tammy? Yep, voting's open.
Mayor,
Please place
yes.
your votes. Doug, is that a yes from you? All right, hearing none, that motion.
It is. Yeah. Sorry. I'm pulling up my app to vote that way. Give me just a
Oh.
sec.
I went
Yeah,
ahead
I'll
and did
get
it for him.
Oh, he's got it.
He
Nice.
said yes,
Okay.
so I did it for him. And
Great.
then as soon as he logs on, he's got it.
That motion passes unanimously. We will now move on to general public comment. Do we have any general public comment?
Just one, Mayor.
Okay. General public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. Please remember this is not time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name, address, and organization for the record. If you will please call the first speaker.
Mayor, the first one that I will is an email that I will read into the record that was sent. Tim Enlow at 13075 Bethany Road. My parents purchased our farm in 1978 to raise their family and as an asset for future generations. They did not buy it as a carnival attraction to appease hypocrites, but for safety, quiet, horses, and agriculture, none of which have been protected. All have been attacked. Additionally, countless federal and state laws have been violated by given power, as well as evidence being withheld when our farm was vandalized and continues to be. We would like to move on before our life ends, but cannot due to the constant red tape, destroying our bottom line by over 50%. Consider that all of Crabapple was zoned agriculture with no sewer not long ago. After the change, 1 acre, 0.8 miles from our 6.3 acre farm sold for over $1 million. Curious, I wonder if any of you would be okay with the assets you're planning on leaving your kids having the value cut in half to appease others. Now it's quite obvious there is a debate about implementing even more restrictions against the few remaining farms, killing innocent futures even more so. I'm 100% against any additional restrictions on my most valuable benefit. I implore y'all to practice more objectively and less self-righteousness. Life is so very short. Mayor, that concludes the general public comment.
Okay, I'll close general public comment. There are no consent agenda items. We will now move on to reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please sound the items?
Thank you, Mayor. That next item, Mayor, is going to be the discussion of AG1 issues and opportunities. Our Community Development and Public Works Director, Sarah Leaders, and our Deputy Community Development Director, Tracy Wilds.
Mayors, member of council, good evening. Tonight, we will be presenting on the AG1 issues and opportunities. And tonight is an opportunity to talk about two things. First is the discussion on challenges and opportunities for AG1 lots. And the second is to provide you with further information to decide on the moratorium as it applies to minor plats in creating lots less than 3 acres. So as we look to what the issue is, we've kind of identified two issues. One being the root cause, and that is that today's building trends with larger homes, amenities, and more site improvements are pushing the limits of existing development standards on smaller lots. Why does this matter, you say? Well, as lots get tighter, it becomes harder to meet setbacks, lot coverage, and other standards, and the outcomes potentially conflict with the rural character that was envisioned in the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So we think that that's the driving problem. That's ultimately the root cause: bigger houses and more amenities on basically the same size or smaller pieces of land. We do think, however, that there is an amplifier to this. It's amplified, which is what's causing the problem to grow. And that's the minor plat process for new lots that are under 3 acres in size and less than 3 acres total. They can be created through the minor plat process with little development review on the front end. That results in development issues that aren't caught up front. Instead, they surface later during the building permit process, where options are limited and impacts are harder to manage. So the bottom line is the minor plat process is quick and it's easy, with limited upfront review, making issues harder to correct later and enabling more small lots, which ultimately is amplifying the root cause. When we looked at the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, we specifically looked at Central Milton, which is one of our largest character areas, represented in the blue on the right-hand side of the slide. And this is an area that has many large lots that are actually over 1 acre in size. This has created a uniform overall density that has actually retained the rural character. But building trends today are potentially conflicting with that vision.
So I'm going to start with looking at some of the data that we pulled as we were reviewing these issues and opportunities. So the data source is going to primarily be from the years 2021 to 2025. In 2021, we changed permitting software, so you may see some of the data actually representing from 2022, but we'll highlight that as we get to it. It just was the information that was readily available through our current City View system. The other thing about this data is it only applies to AG1 lots. So we're not looking at anything in Crabapple or Deerfield. This is just AG1 lots. The last item related to all the data is that this is based on when the certificate of occupancy is issued for the home. So these are all going to be data points around new home construction when that construction is completed. So when the CO is issued, that's when it is added to this count that you'll see in some of these data slides. So the first thing we looked at, and kind of the first part of the data point, is the lot size for these new home constructions. When we look at some other measures like lot coverage, there is That's related to proportion, and lot size is always the base. It's always the denominator of that proportion that we're going to look at related to footprint, related to amount of improvements on a site. So lot size is that base denominator of any of our proportions. So this shows a couple different things over the last 5 years. First of all is the bucket where the different lot sizes fit into. So we have the blue bar, which is the 1 to 1.5 acre lot size, the brown, which is 1.5 to 3, and the green, which is greater than 3 acres. So in each year, you can see the breakdown of how many new homes were constructed on each of these size lots. Then it took the total of all the lot sizes, averaged those to get the black trend line you see here. Another measure it looked at was taking the median of those different acreages, and it produced a very similar trend to what you see represented by the average. Next, we're going to talk about footprint. So that is any part of the structure that is covered by a roof. So the graphic on the right shows the lot area in blue and that footprint outlined in red. It also correlates to what you would see on the tax assessor site that lays out the square footage of, again, that base footprints, the first floor house footprint, any covered porches, attached garages, and that gives us our total floor area. So now that you've heard how the footprint is determined, these are the trends related to that floor area footprint for the same data set you saw with the lot area. So this is over the 5 years, and it shows an increase in that footprint size year over year. And as we consider ratios, this type of metric would fit in the top part of the proportion, with the lot size being the bottom as we look at ratios. And as we get further in the presentation, there will be an opportunity that looks at how we can look at structuring footprint as a consideration in lot coverage. Okay, the next category is lot coverage. So that is not only the building footprint, what's under the roof, but it's any other impervious improvement coverage on the entire lot. And we have two values that we look at that with our zoning code, and that is a 20% lot coverage if the lot fronts a public road, and 25% if it fronts a private road. So these are roughly similar size lots, and you can see the peach is what we would consider the lot coverage on each of these. So this is one of our smaller data sets, 2022 through 2025. And another element we looked at in this data set was we took those smaller lots, that blue, what we represented by the blue line here. So it's the 1 to 1.5 acre lots. Looked at all of those and determined what was the approved plan for the percent lot coverage on each of those, and plotted those as data points. So one thing you can see with this is what our ranges are in that percent coverage across the years. One opportunity that we wanted to look at with this as we talk further is looking for an opportunity to get that range to be a little closer. So maybe to see the data points within that range. So what I wanted to highlight here, hopefully you all can see the green color that's a little different. So that represented kind of the lower third of 2022, 2023, and 2024 of those data points was in the 10 to 15% coverage range. When we get to 2025, you'll note that there aren't any below 15%. So that indicates that the lots are being permitted and they are nearing the top of that range of percent coverage. And just to point out, in that data set, there were 123 total that were used in that 1 to 1.5 acre range across all 4 years. So a few patterns, a few trends we noticed in that data. We also looked at some of how that impervious or lot coverage breaks down across different areas. So the house and the driveway are the largest. They represent the largest of that percentage. And then we looked at what percentage pools, pool decks, what they averaged across, and how many of those lots actually were built on the front end with a pool. And so that was about 50%, and the average was 1,650 square feet. Another contributing factor that we noticed as we started looking at this lot coverage was that there was a difference in some cases between what was on the approved plans as meeting the exact requirement of 20 or 25%, and then what was actually built out in the field based on aerial imagery. We've identified an opportunity to address this, and we'll discuss that later as we get to the opportunities on how to better account for and track that lot coverage between approved plans and what is actually built. One other thing I wanted to point out on this slide is that the two graphics on the right, the aerial imageries, these are two bordering subdivisions. They're both private subdivisions along the same road. They actually adjoin property lines. And just to illustrate the difference in that home construction, with the top one happening in the 2013 to 2019 time range, and looking at driveways and pools and house sizes relative to the development that's adjoining it that was started in 2017 and is currently still underway. I can get some water. Okay, our next data point is related to variances. So we want to talk about the variances that have gone to BZA. You all have seen a couple variances, and so how that relates to what you may not, the public data that may not be available related to inquiries we get about lot coverage, things that may not be built to plan, built without a permit, or just these inquiries into variances for different lot coverage. Or any variance issue first, and then we're going to focus in on lot coverage. So I wanted to give you this data just in context to overall variance request. So to see that there's various requests related to setbacks and then to lot coverage for, particularly in this case, it was a driveway, and lot coverage for pools. So you can see the percentage that lot coverage represents in the overall consideration of variances. We'll note that that light blue line is a subdivision that proceeded with a primary variance, which, because of the number of lots was impacted, that was presented in April, I believe April of 2025, for council consideration.
Sarah, before you leave this slide, it is important to note that the variances from our data is primarily for new construction and not necessarily for existing hardships on existing lots. So that this slide sort of represents that analysis.
Yeah, good point. So now we're going to focus on those lot coverage items you saw in the previous slide. So the bars with the red box around them represent cases that went before the Board of Zoning Appeals and were approved. And you can see that those break down by type. So in 2021, again, that permitting software change, we just show record of two pools that were approved by BZA in 2021. In 2022, you can see the number of approved pools, and then you can see we had even more than that in inquiries about how can I build a pool? Can I build a pool? What's my lot coverage? And then the other categories related to additional driveway, an addition to a home, or an accessory structure.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are these approvals or inquiries?
So the ones with the red box are approvals. So just the bars that have the red box around them were approvals.
So everything else is not approved? The black and
Correct. It
purple
was
are not
just a
approved?
inquiry that we had to our staff member
Okay,
that
so in
handles.
2025, after the red box around the yellow, all of those were not approved.
Correct.
They got a hearing,
They were
inquired.
inquiries, yes. So they either changed their mind, they found a way to remove some impervious, or whatever condition was prohibiting them to be able to proceed with what they're inquiring about, whether it was a pool, if they removed a piece of a driveway. I'll go through a few examples of what some of those alternate solutions were.
I've read that. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
So all of those outside of the red box were inquiries related to projects that were going to exceed the impervious limits. And we
Right.
found other alternatives to try to avoid that, including things like pervious pavers and things along those lines, correct? But those were all
Yes.
ones that were going to exceed the impervious surface limits.
Right.
And do we
Yep.
have a way to follow up to see if it is done by code that those inquiries stay, if they're not quote approved, that they do follow the rules?
All of those that are not within the red box worked with our staff to find alternative methods. So they still had construction done or improvements done, or they abandoned their project altogether. But
Right.
those that did have the projects done, we still had to inspect those.
All right, thank you.
And this was just a staff-generated data point we have one person that deals with all the variances, so he was able to look through his records and see all the inquiries over the years, categorize them by type, and that's what we were able to present with this chart. We'll point out too that the 2026 number is only for the month of January, and we're already at 3.
When you say, Sarah, sorry, this is Doug. When you say 3 inquiries, does that mean that it's actually gone to BZA, or that they're just asking about parameters of what it takes to build a pool?
They're asking about parameters of what it would take to build a pool when they're already exceeding, or their project would exceed, the allowed lot coverage.
Okay.
Okay.
And in the last 3 years, we've had 5 instances that have come in front of BZA and been approved. In the last 3 years, right? Just those 5?
Right, correct.
One for a driveway and 4 for pools? Okay.
And just to be clear, this is all up to 1.5 acre lots? Or is this all?
This is all
variances?
AG1.
All AG, okay.
Yes. Sorry, I did jump criteria there. I went from,
Because we're kind of
from
having
the data
the
point.
issue around 1 to 1.5, right?
right,
So
now we're
just-
back to all AG1.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay. Okay. Now this gets into a few of those examples. So we looked at the narrative behind what that inquiry was and what process it wound up taking. So the first one is a circle driveway turnaround. A lot wanted to add that after the fact, but they were already maxed at 19.8% on that lot coverage already. So I don't believe anything has proceeded on that particular one, but it was at least evaluated as, can I add a circular turnaround? Next one, a new pool went over the 20%. So in that case, the owner removed some of the gravel from their driveway to equate to the area they needed to stay under 20%. We had an inquiry about pickleball, adding that type of court to their yard. And while the court could not function with pervious pavers, they were able to use those pervious pavers on a pool deck to stay, and walkways to stay under the 20%. We have an example where the home buyer was unaware that their impervious was maxed out and the realtor had told them that they could build a pool. They did go to BZA on that one and they were granted the additional 2.95%. And while that is a relatively small number, it does still have a visual impact on that lot coverage. Because you're only at 20%, so 2% can still have that impact.
A quick question, is
Yes.
lot coverage and impervious surface limits the same thing? Or are those two different items?
So they're very similar. So lot coverage in our definitions is defined as impervious coverage, and it's defined as including the house, the accessory structures, concrete, pools, and pool decks. When we define impervious related to stormwater, a swimming pool is not in that list of what makes up impervious related to stormwater. So a pool, while it doesn't allow water to soak into the ground, it also doesn't have runoff. So it's treated a little bit differently, but for the most part, impervious and lot coverage, as we're talking about tonight, are synonymous.
The maximum that we allow for impervious surface limits is 20%?
On lots that front public roads, and it's 25% on lots that front private roads.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, and the last case study is related to an accessory inquiry. They workshopped some other ideas, no variance as of now, and still revising the permit. So that's one that's in the works. Okay, the last trend point we wanted to share was just some adjacent neighbor concerns we've heard related to, we call it adjacency, and that's most commonly found where a new side yard adjoins an existing rear yard. So the two pictures on the left are, again, the view from the rear yard, approaching the rear yard, and the new structure that you can see through the trees is a side yard of a new build. So that's one instance. And then the other just shows, again, an existing house. Hopefully you can see the arrow here. So existing house and the existing rear setback compared to the new build on the right that is a side setback adjoining that rear. So that's where we have seen and heard the most concerns from adjoining neighbors. These aren't as frequent as a rear to rear situation that you would have, but we did want to note that scale and setbacks can have an impact as it relates to side to rear.
Okay, so this slide actually shows the relationship between how land is divided and how land is developed. And so to reorientate you, we have identified the root cause, right? Max buildable elements and amenities built on small lots. So the 1X problem, the root cause. The amplifier is on the left side, which is what I'm going to be talking about. And that relates to the minor plat process. So to subdivide a parcel, you can use the minor plat process, but that minor plat process determines the size of the lots and where those lot lines go. It does not necessarily evaluate what things are going to be built on that lot. So the development standards for developing a lot control the building size, the impervious surface, but that's only applied after a lot has been created. So the result is that the development impacts are often assessed too late when lots are already created and maxed out. Okay, so it's important to note that we have two processes for subdividing parcels. We have the minor plat process, and we have the preliminary plat process, which ultimately evolves to a final plat, right? So if we look at the process on the left, the minor plat process is a quick and easy way to create lots that are less than 3 acres in size and less than a total of 3 lots. So anything less than 3 in total. But those parcels are divided with limited development review up front. That lot can then be sold, and many of the development issues, such as building footprint, site analysis, impervious surface, trees, stormwater, those are all addressed during the building permit process. And again, that's after the lot has sold. So that burden is pushed to the homeowner or to the person who's going to be building and developing that lot. So it's important to note that the person who subdivides the property, takes it through the minor plat process, is not necessarily the same person who's building out and developing that lot. So that process often leads to variance requests, added costs, and design changes after a lot has already changed hands. In contrast, the preliminary plat, detailed on the right side, requires extensive upfront review, which allowing site constraints and impacts to be identified earlier in the process, and usually before the user has purchased the lot. So there's a key takeaway here. The timing does matter. So both processes ultimately receive the same level of review and scrutiny by the city. But when the bulk of the analysis is conducted before the lot is sold, as is the case in the preliminary plat process, there are fewer problems and significantly improved outcomes. The minor plat focuses on size and shape of the lot without considering what goes on that lot. So the design is backwards. It's the lot first and the function later. So the lot can still meet the city's requirements, the minimum requirements, but still not meet the future homeowner's needs or expectations. So the best analogy that I have for this is you're buying a new house. You're going to be moving into a new house, but you go and purchase all of the furniture before you actually see how big the rooms are. How many bedrooms do you have? What furniture do you need to fill that house? It doesn't make sense to buy the furniture before you see how big your house is and what you have to work for. This analogy is used here because when lot size are sized before the actual analysis is done, you don't really see the problem until much later in the process.
Tracy, could I ask a question, please? But the size of the lot is an acre, right?
Yes. Or greater, but minimum of an acre.
But why are we getting into just random buyer beware stuff? I mean, I don't see how that, you buy an acre lot, you need to build something that works on that lot that meets the city criteria. I feel like I'm missing something here.
No, it's a buyer beware for the,
Yeah,
for the new, anybody that's buying under the minor plat really should do a lot of investigating before they decide to buy that and build what they think is their dream home.
But that could be said of any lot.
Yeah,
I
it's true.
don't
I'm not
understand.
arguing
I
with
mean,
that.
I feel like we have a distinction without a difference.
I may be able to help that. I think the issue we have here is they certainly would have to build and improve within the confines of our regulations. What we're seeing is that larger and larger homes are being built. So that, yes, generally they are still staying without the variances. They're staying within the regulations, though you're going to find out that some are not, and we have a solution to that issue as well. But what you're seeing, if you go back to that one slide where it showed how we were getting larger and larger minimum builds. So what you're getting as a result of that is a different feeling, and it's hard to quantify feeling. So, but what we're trying to do is trying to show that what you're experiencing over the last 10 years is larger and larger improvements on those same size lots. They're not necessarily exceeding our regulations, but the question is, do our regulations match what the expectations were in our comprehensive plan? I think that is kind of what we're trying to
But they're
determine tonight.
meeting the criteria, right?
They're meeting the code as it exists today. The question I think the council will have to determine if you feel it meets the vision in our comprehensive plan, our work ends today. If you don't feel that it meets the vision in the comprehensive plan, then we have some more work to do.
Well, how do we characterize what a feeling is? When you say meets the feeling, and I'm not being combative, I'm really interested, as you know from our conversation today, I'm trying to understand this. What is the feeling of the comprehensive plan if they're within regulation?
If respectfully, let me return that question back to you. As you drive around the city and you recognize that some homes just don't seem to fit in currently with what we think the city of Milton is, how do you capture that feeling? And I know we've had those discussions as well. It's a challenge.
You're leading me to characterize good-looking houses versus butt ugly. I mean, I don't know.
Well, not necessarily the architecture,
Yeah, I understand.
but the
Crowded.
what is the feel of, and I know it's very difficult, and that's kind of what I've been hoping to be able to position the council well for tonight, because at the end of the day, if you read the comprehensive plan, most of it's about feel. It's not about dollars or numbers.
What's the character thing?
And I think I think if you drive around, you know which subdivisions were built in which decade in Milton as buildings, and it has changed. You see some, they have plenty of mature trees up along the road that are buffered very well. Some are clear cut all the way up to the curb. It just depends, and they work within the rules and regs that we have. But I think we've been having this debate, really a constructive debate, for 20 years, and the city is always trying to catch up to these building changes and evolves over time.
But are there places that are clear cut to the road?
Oh, yeah, there's
Are there?
a lot of these minor plats, these new minor
I mean,
plats.
I've seen them
are.
the ones we talked about. I don't know.
We'll
if it's
have more
permanent.
information shortly, but I think
Okay.
one slide that really shows, kind of captures what we're talking about, is the slide that we had a couple of slides ago, which showed the two subdivisions that are right next to each other that was built about 10 years apart.
Well, one thing that's I'm sorry,
No,
that's
go
my
ahead.
last point.
Go right. go
One
for
thing
it.
though, at this inflection point is kind of interesting is that the committees seem to be doing their jobs. I mean, they're saying no. And the city seems to be doing its job, looking for solutions to meet, I guess I'm very, not sure I'll learn more, but I don't see the whole, it's our role to do anything about the 1 acre buyer beware thing. I'm not sure the buyer has to be that aware. They're getting an acre. I mean,
If
they're
we're
No, but I guess I misunderstood your point, but to me, is the issue the fact that we've got individuals buying lots and not realizing they can't do all that they thought they could on the size lot that they purchased? Did I misunderstand what you were saying?
In this example for small lots, the development review is not captured up front. It's simply the lot size and the lot lines where they
I
go.
understand that, but are we finding that homeowners that buy from these minor plats are coming to us saying, I wanted to build this house, I bought this, it's a minimum of 1 acre. Now I can't because it's sloped or whatever. So they're running into issues after the fact, after they've bought the land.
So that is what staff is experiencing. In fact, some of these minor plats, for lack of better terms, applicants are getting the minor plats, going through this quick process and flipping the lots. And if they flip the lots to a homeowner, this homeowner may have decided, maybe there are site constraints, topo challenges, easements, and things like that may have demanded a little bit larger lot for the things that they desire to be on that lot.
And just one point, I just want to be clear, we're not trying to convince you there's a problem.
Oh, I know that. Thank you.
This
I
is,
appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Yep.
So as we further look at some of our plat data over the last 5 years, this graphic is just representing how many lots have been created using the minor plat process versus the preliminary plat process. This does exclude our large lots. So this is lots that have been created from 1 to 3 acres in size. And we've had 36 plats over the last 5 years that has produced 83 lots. These lots did not have that upfront development review. In contrast, from the preliminary plat, we've had 8 plats over the 5 years that have produced 104 lots. So the takeaway is that we have similar number of lots that are created using both processes.
So one final data point is more than just the data. We wanted to get a take on how some of these outcomes make people feel. So we reached out to a set group of stakeholders, and this is the breakdown that shows the respondents that we had in each of these categories. And there were similar numbers that were on the initial list under each category, but this was our response rate of the 66 respondents at a 36% rate. So one of the big questions that every group got was, is too large for the lot a problem in Milton? And the pie graph on the right shows that the green, the 2 shades of green are the yes, either significant or moderate, and the blue is no, not really. The orange and peach are not enough information or maybe. The other component of that is how often does it occur, with a majority saying sometimes, often, or very often.
The majority, the 64% of the 44% plus how often does what occur? Who are the 64% of those that say yes?
Do you recall that one, Steve?
I believe it would be 64% of the total surveyed.
Respondents.
So
Too
that
large.
was not one of the logic questions. I don't believe it said if you say yes, you get the next question. I believe that still opened it up to that question. So I'd have to assume that the ones that showed up in the 8 and 12 probably showed up here in the 4 and 32.
Well, wait a second. If 16 are moderate and 36 say no, not really, 12 say maybe, not sure, and that's really the majority. So the 64% say yes, sometimes, often, very often, that it's too large for the lot. I mean, I tend to sometimes think that. I would think it would be 64% of only the 44%.
I'd have to go back because I don't want to answer
Okay.
you wrong. I believe I captured it. I want to just remind you that unfortunately we only had 24
Yeah,
respondents.
I understand. All right.
And the last point on the survey was just some of the top themes in a couple different categories. These were the ones that had the higher percentage. There were other options to choose from that had lower percentages. So with the most cited impacts, that being loss of privacy from height, massing, or proximity, the tree canopy, reduced cohesion or enjoyment. And what respondents picked as what they thought was driving it was market demand, setbacks that do not scale with building size, and lot coverage and impervious allowances. The final data point on the survey was how to approach any policy change, and the 44% chose a top priority, with 32% saying biggest risk. So we do have that full data on the survey, but these were just some areas we wanted to highlight. So this slide we wanted to now break. We've gone over all the trends, all the data that we've looked at related to the perceived issues and opportunities in AG1. And so now we're going to shift to the opportunities. We're just going to go over these very, very high level. There's a lot more research that can go into looking at these as potential options, but we didn't want to get into any of them in too much detail, but at least go through potential opportunities. So what we wanted to visualize with this graphic is we see an opportunity to put some improved guardrails around that lot development standard. So looking at what can fit on the lot and what the needs and wants are for new lots, and then let that drive lot size and feel like a possible better outcome. But the opportunities are going to focus at what we could look at for some guardrails around lot development. So we'll start with lot coverage. This was the same graphic from earlier just to illustrate what we're talking about with lot coverage. So we said right now we have two different thresholds. For public streets, that lot coverage is 20%, and for private streets, 25%. So opportunities we see with lot coverage are to look at our percentages and to standardize some policies. First of all, looking at the percentage, we do have that varying number between what sort of street it fronts. So we could look at standardizing that. We could possibly look at the opportunity if an area is reserved or dedicated as an undisturbed buffer, there may be a incentive percent that we could look at. And lastly, to not max out at initial build, but to reserve a little bit of that lot coverage for future needs. From the standardizing the policy standpoint, we would propose to require as-builts so we can confirm that that lot coverage is what is represented on the approved plans and confirm that it's built according to the approved conditions. Related to footprint, there's a calculation known as a floor area ratio that takes the building floor area, which is the footprint that we talked about earlier, divided by the total lot area. Again, that footprint's the first floor of the house, any attached garages, porches, anything under a roof. This graphic just shows for different size houses on the same lot what that ratio is. And the ratio is a percent of the total area. Just another way to look at that. Accessory structures or amenities could also have a proportion. They could be lumped with the floor area. We could look at a combined, this impervious amenity and house proportion. Maybe not include the driveway, let that still be part of lot coverage, but to group these two things that are kind of unique about each property together. So this just shows how you could calculate a amenity coverage percentage or ratio.
Another opportunity would be able to look at buildable area in relationship to the adjacency of existing home residents and parcels. It's important to note that the lot size does not necessarily represent the buildable area. You may encounter site constraints with stream buffers, floodplains, or easements that further limit your buildable area. So again, the buildable area could be smaller than the actual lot size and setbacks. So we also see another opportunity for here to modify what is eligible for the minor plat process. So again, the minor plat would continue to be processed for subdividing large lots over 3 acres and to process simple lot line modifications. However, the creation of multiple new small lots, 3 or fewer lots under 3 acres, would no longer qualify for the minor plat process. We would see those go through the preliminary plat process. The intent there is to ensure that the lot size is informed by development standards before the land is divided. And the added benefit is that there's better protection of tree canopy and the rural view shed.
So this brings us back to the first slide where we talked about the 1X issue and the 5X issue. So wanted to just look back at, based on what we've presented, do you believe that the amount improvement on lots offends the spirit or intent of the comprehensive plan? And then for the 5X issue, do you see issues with the amplified concern of creating more lots with minimal review? So we can stop here. We only had a few other slides after this. I know that was a significant amount of information, but wanted to stop and first discuss the content that was presented as well as the amplified concern.
Will you go to the comprehensive plan slide? We can take a look. We go all the way back. So is it fair to say if we take your recommendation on question number 2 and the minor plat is taken away and they go through the major the major process, that the rural view shed will apply to minor plats? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
It could.
Okay.
If we, so does, if we want to.
Correct.
Okay, because I think that goes to, I mean, kind of, the view shed is a lot in this comp plan, and that's just, if we allow it on the major plats, maybe that is something we do. I'm just,
When you say major, are you talking about the 3 acre, even when they're subdivided, if they've gone through the process, or just the preliminary 3 acres?
the major plat process is more than 5 lots, is that right?
More than 3.
More than 3 lots. Okay.
Okay. So is that where we are? Are we now trying to decide?
I think we're trying to decide, is the comp plan to the
Okay.
first question
No, it's
there.
good. I mean, you brought us to that, but here's go back to your 1 times amplified. What do 1 and 5
Yeah.
again mean? My short recall, what is that?
I'm sorry, say again.
First bullet, 1 times, what is that?
It's just basically saying that's the root cause. The amplifier is just amplifying it. For the 1X problem versus a 5X problem.
So who has the amplified concern of creating more lots with minimal review? Who has that? Is that,
I would say that's more outcome-based. Going back, can you go back to the funnel slide?
Yeah.
So everything in that, what you lose is everything in that orange when you're doing the minor plats. And a lot of times when you look at when you do that site analysis and you determine what your footprint's going to be, it helps better determine what your lot lines will look like, as opposed to creating the lot lines first and then trying to cram the house or the building envelope within that. That's one example. The hydrology, tree canopy, and some of the things they discussed certainly impacts it. But I think for the purposes of tonight's conversation, it's really that building footprint and the associated amenities, which would be in total the impervious surface.
this may be a dumb question, but, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but can we collapse that process and just follow the other process?
That's
It's kind of what we're thinking. That's kind of what we're doing.
That's kind of
That's the second question. That's the
Yeah,
second question.
is the question get rid of the
Come
minor
on.
process and just go with the preliminary final plat process so everyone follows the same and there's no surprises for whoever ends up building the house?
So that is generally what I believe we were discussing, with the exception of large lots. So currently.
Yeah, so this is a minimum of 1 acre, minimum three lots. That would be the case. You'd get rid of the minor plat. I guess my question is, what's the drawback? Like what do we not know that is a negative to getting rid of the minor plat process?
I envision some developers would be able to identify what they believe to be drawbacks in that process. One of the reasons you have minor plats is so landowners can fairly easily subdivide without going through everything you see within the orange before they can subdivide. So there are challenges. I'm sure that people in the business could probably bring up more of that. One other point, though, I just want to make, because going back to our large lots, which are in excess of 3 acres, those, regardless of the number of lots, of subdivisions, of subdivided lots, as long as they're all over 3 lots, it's still a minor subdivision, a minor plat. And there is no recommendation on changing that process, so that those large lot subdivisions would still follow the old minor plat process of speed.
It's kind of easy, under 3 acres. So over 3 acres, you're doing minor, under 3 acres, you're doing major. That
I think
sums
that's
it up.
it, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So is it fair to characterize if we got rid of the minor plat process and rolled it up into the other process? You've referenced that maybe some in the business or whatever, there would be some angst because of change their way of doing business, but it sounds like there's already angst with on the buyer side and perhaps the sales side, et cetera, which, personally, I don't think that's our role to worry about that, because our committees are doing their job, you all are doing their job, and, there is the whole buyer beware of anything, but ultimately, there's probably the same amount of angst that we get. So if we got rid of that angst from either one of those parties, it might be short-lived. We just focus on the other side.
And perhaps there's ways that we could streamline our current preliminary plat review. Doesn't mean we would eliminate any of those steps, but maybe there are ways that we could speed that process up. But I'm sure that, and I look, and some of the responses we got in the survey, I think we got 8 or 9 developers and builders, and they talked about this a little bit. And I do believe that some of them do believe it could impact things. I think we also heard from some builders and developers that also supported potentially having more review at that point. But again, our sample size on that was 9 or 8. So I think we should the council decide to move forward with any of this, we need to do more work. This was basically a 3 or 4 week process trying to get as much information as we could in front of you during this short-lived emergency moratorium.
Well, it feels like you're bringing up an issue of fairness, and the feeling of Milton will benefit, and I've reflected on that. And what does everyone say when they come to the podium? They're very kind about the vegetation, the trees, the open fields. So anytime we have a 1 acre lot fronting a busy road, and if it's not well treed and have a lot of landscaping, it sticks out. And it's not the feeling of Milton. It's not what we want. And that, if there's things that we can do to enhance that, I mean, that would be extremely appealing.
Hey, Steve, quick question back to who could this be detrimental to? If we were to change that process, would that impact builders and developers more, or would it potentially impact current landowners?
I would have to say probably both.
So there would be negative implications to those who own property now.
They would be less able to very quickly subdivide their property. It wouldn't prevent the subdivision of property, though.
It would cost them more, and it would take more time.
Can we get numbers with that?
Yeah,
Length? Like, what's the length, and when you say cost, what is that?
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, my concern is it's one thing to say we're going to make it more difficult for builders to build in our city. It's another to say we're going to hamstring some property owners that now make things more difficult for them to subdivide for their family or whatever their reason
Yeah,
may
that's a
be, right?
concern.
Um,
But what is that? I mean, I don't want to leave that alone.
Well, I think like the question tonight is, do we generally think, yeah, you know what, let's take that next step? And I think the slides ahead of us are going to say, well, if council's like kind of lukewarm about this, like, why don't we just take that next step? I think over the next 60 days is when we have all those meetings with the stakeholders and builders and developers and landowners. And if you wouldn't mind, could you go ahead and go through that process, what that would be? Planning Commission, CZIM, are we going to have community input meetings, then council and work session and all that stuff? Because we're not going to decide that obviously tonight, I don't think.
We've skipped a few slides here now, right?
We only skipped one.
Oh, okay.
See?
So we ended here, and then if we do proceed with addressing some next steps related to both of these, we have some immediate next steps. And then how that lays out is we see these working on a similar tract, but anything we look at development standard based is likely a more complex issue that would likely take more time. It may take, a whole meeting with Planning Commission just to discuss floor area ratio, what that is, how we looked at it. So there's more that goes into that, but this is the fastest track proposal that we could come up with to start on code amendments. So with public input opportunities running throughout the process, we would propose to have this very similar presentation to this at the February 25th Planning Commission to preview them to the topic. We could then advertise for CZIM and public hearings that would fall the end of March for that community zoning information meeting and then the Planning Commission. If we wanted to, again, this is just very fast tracked. If there wanted to be a first presentation at a special called meeting, the end of March, that would set up for consideration under the zoning agenda, April 13th. April's a odd month with spring break hitting that first week, so everything's pushed a little further back.
Good question. Can we strip the two and do the minor major one? I think we could hit the fast track target on that one. Still obviously want the input from everyone, but I think a lot of this complexity, floor area ratio, buffers and all that stuff, incentives, I like the incentives that you threw out on the impervious surface. I think that's going to involve a lot more public input and citizens and, everyone, all the stakeholders. I think it works out well when we extend things and we allow more public input. We tend to get a better result. So maybe we can strip those and say major, minor plat, let's go through this process, fast track it in the moratorium in April, and then allow all that public input and process to go on and allow y'all to have more time. Is that what y'all are thinking, Steve?
I believe so.
That is, yes.
So we're thinking like two different tracks.
Right. We could start the preliminary work on getting more data, really looking at, if we go back here, we felt we really needed to further evaluate and vet, so that's showing the opportunities and that root cause. So that's the lot development standards. So we do see a need for more data analysis review to inform what we would even look to move forward with. Whereas with the amplifier issue, the minor plat issue, felt like that could be ready to move to that next step a little quicker. So we don't have to necessarily have these on the same track. We could, whether we introduce it at Planning Commission, maybe we just go with, we don't even bring the lot development into their discussions yet. We focus on the minor plat initially, and we'll continue to do data analysis and just really looking at the lot development standards before we start any sort of process on those.
Ms. Leader?
Yeah, go for it. Okay.
Ms. Leader, so where then is the hard stop? Because a large part of my brain has a hard time playing with other people's money. And, the fairness scenario. And I think we're all fair and we're looking at something ultimately to be fair, but I want to go back to Councilmember Haney's question. We're talking about cost and time between the two. And we got here tonight, I guess, because of cost and time. And I don't think it to just blow past that. We must have some idea what that is. So what is the difference between the cost and the time between the two tracks?
Can I offer another variable?
Mm-hmm.
Outcome. What is the desired outcome? What experience and outcome is created by going through these scenarios?
Okay, well,
So I'm just saying, if we have better outcomes going through the preliminary, because more thought process goes there, while there may be more cost and time, does it present a better outcome?
yeah. So, but what is that?
Yes, I agree.
I don't know if we have that information.
And,
at this moment,
and
but
I don't,
it is
expe-
it
and
is
I
a
don't
good
think,
question.
and I don't think it's a great question, and I think it's the most important question, but I don't think we expected y'all to have that answer tonight. I think that answer comes April 13th.
Well, wait a second, is it
Right.
an assumption or is it a feeling or is there going to be
Yeah,
hard data?
I agree. I think that begs a different question. Sarah, can you go back to the comparison slide of the two neighborhoods built within 10 years of each other or so?
Was this the one, the comparison of the processes?
No, where you showed two different neighborhoods side by side. The
Sure.
neighborhoods are close to each other. Oh, that one. So I guess my question is, are we trying to solve for not doing the bottom right and putting as much on 1 acre lots? Or are we trying to solve so that those homes are just on bigger pieces of property? Like, what are we getting at? Because the bottom right, if those are all built within code, I don't know what we're talking about. If they needed a variance, that's one thing, and maybe we don't grant a variance. But if they're all built within their legal rights to build those properties, I don't know what we're talking about. If we're just suggesting we would rather them build those homes on bigger pieces of property, then we're back to the large lot incentives, and how do we incent them to take one of those homes out and make all the lots a little bit bigger?
If I could, I think we could all agree, except for maybe a couple of those lots there, that they comply with our current regulations. I think the question before the council tonight is, do those current regulations still match what you expected to see in the city of Milton? Because we're seeing a steady increase in the amount of or the ratio of improvement on the lot. And if the answer is we don't see an issue with this increased ratio, then there is probably very little reason to discuss much further.
So if it's in code, the ratio might be higher, but it's within code.
They are, you can generally assume what you're seeing is within our current development codes. There are a couple in this picture that probably are related to another issue, and that's as-built inspections that we need to be doing. But generally, you can assume what you just stated, Councilmember Cookley, is correct.
And is it fair to say if we take the next step to allow some discussion, and the end result's either going to be one of two things: you're going to have a smaller home on the same size lot, or you're going to have a larger home on a little bit of a bigger lot, correct? I mean, it's either going to be one of the two. They're either going to shrink the house size, or they're going to increase the house size but have a larger lot.
And I think that
If we choose to do something
Correct.
to change AG1, if we don't, then not. But I guess my question is, what's our end game? Like, what is the problem we're trying to solve for? What are we trying to get to?
I think the problem we're trying to solve for is whether or not this council feels that the current building patterns are still in alignment with what was expected in the comprehensive plan.
Well, okay, so we've now left our process. And are we now in whether we have a feeling that people are building too big of homes and we're not happy about that even though they're within code? And is that really something how are we going to legislate that with the original thesis we started on tonight?
That's exactly where we started, respectfully. Legislation is exactly how we create the vision, or how we execute the vision of the comprehensive plan. The current AG1 standards are a perfect result of that. It's just that building styles and amenities have changed, and what staff is hearing are complaints from some neighbors, complaints from some of the new home buyers. And we're duty bound to bring this information to you because we're seeing a trend. It's up to the council to determine whether or not you think that trend is in line with what you want to see as policymakers.
And over the last 20 years, whether good or for bad, this council, prior councils have created these standards along the way, and they've changed them. Like impervious surface, that was just probably introduced, what, 10 years ago? Rural View Shed 12 years ago. So, I mean, it's not like, unfortunately, that's kind of part of our job. We either make rules and regulations, we tweak them, or we just say, no, we just move on. I mean, it's kind of what this city's, and we've had this debate for the last 20 years and it continues.
It really does boil down to this,
Yeah.
something somewhat simple is what you're seeing, if that's still in alignment with your
And
expectations.
I want to extend it a little while because I think it's important to get, I mean, we had 25 responses out of 42,000 people. That's very difficult to legislate when you don't give it to the citizens to allow them to have that dialogue and have all that discussion. And then we make that, difficult decision. And that's why I feel like, going down your proposal, I think is the right way to kind of get those answers from the people. I mean, it's kind of
Okay, but all those people that you're talking about, they've exercised their property rights.
I'm talking about.
No, but wait a second. But the people who haven't exercised their property rights and may want to sell or may have smaller lots that could be subdivided, they're going to be affected. So, they're sort of the last out. And so I'm not sure.
I mean, my calls are 50-50. I get the calls from the property owners saying, don't touch any of my property. I got the people that have just moved here after COVID. I have people that just drive through here, or just residents that have been here for 20, 30 years and get it from all over. And that's why I think this is always a difficult discussion. And we've had it every few years. And it's important to allow it to be vetted in the public forum and just letting it go through the process.
But we're talking about extending a moratorium for 90 days.
April 13th, right? Is
Up
what
to
day?
90 days,
Up
or no, up to 120 days, but with the expectation that we should be able to complete our work by April, well, I forgot what the date was.
13th.
The concern with the moratorium is those landowners. How many of those landowners
Impacts.
are we impacting?
But we have a risk
Correct, yeah.
slide.
That's a good
Yeah.
question.
Well, Steve, let me ask. 2025, there were 20 inquiries or things that came before the BZA. And only, 2 of those were approved? Is that correct, in the red box?
So the inquiries came into staff
Came into
and
staff.
didn't even advance to a variance application because we were able to either work out an alternate solution using pervious pavers, and whether that, while it still represents an improvement on the lot, it does satisfy the stormwater component of impervious paver wood, but it does still, change the feel of the lot. So that was one of the
Okay, so
solutions.
staff is able to solve problems, which is fantastic. I always knew you could. That's fantastic. BZA approved 2 of them out of the 20. So having a hard time seeing where some of this problem lies.
I got a question.
I mean, I see it. I mean, I'll just be very frank. There is a obvious problem, I believe, with the minor and the major plat. When you
Well,
drive.
I understand that part. of it.
Okay. Well.
I've already said that. I
Oh, so we're good.
understand.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the second one is much more complex. And I don't think our intention is to extend the moratorium all the way through. I don't think this council wants to extend the moratorium all the way to get all those other objectives done. I don't think that's the question, is it, Steve? I think.
It isn't.
Okay.
In fact, this isn't about expanding the moratorium to preliminary plats. It's still focused on the minor plats. If the council wanted to do that, though it is not something we're recommending, you'd have to enact that moratorium separate and apart from this.
If we didn't extend the moratorium, but we still wanted to look at the whole AG1 process, what's the downside of that?
We have a slide for that? Can you describe the slides so they have a better understanding?
So this risk slide identifies if the moratorium were to end, that there would be no disruption. We would continue as we have, as our policy is now, quick splits, creating potential problem lots. We could extend the targeted moratorium on minor plats, which would have a limited disruption. It would stop the quick splits while process and standards are vetted. And then the final would be to consider a future moratorium to pause for more review of the root cause on AG1 lots, which would create more of a higher disruption.
So your
So, but
pink lot.
explain to me, if we don't do the moratorium, what can happen versus if we have the moratorium in place? I just want to get that.
A great question. The purpose of a moratorium is to kind of put a stop in place. So
Right.
we have a chance to, any body has a chance to determine, better analyze if there's a problem. And if there is a problem, to be able to change the code accordingly. In this situation, the risk would be with the preliminary plat specifically, is because they could be done so quickly. That's kind of what's behind the 5X label on that.
Okay.
Because they could be done so quickly, and all of those parcels in the pink are not necessarily everybody has come to us about subdividing, but parcels that are easily subdividable that would probably fall into that minor plat category. That's the worst case scenario risk you're seeing in front of you.
And so
and
when
those
you
would
say,
be-
sorry, dear.
Go ahead.
Okay, you say quickly, they could be done so quickly. Now we're getting to my question of what's the time frame? What's the time frame of one versus the other?
Can you give me a guesstimate on a minor plat versus a
And so
preliminary
for a
plat?
minor plat, it's approximately 3 months. A minor plat does not require to go to planning commission. There's not necessarily a public hearing. In fact, minor plats are presented to you all on the consent agenda.
So if we don't extend the moratorium, the downside is that individuals that need to move forward with selling their property through the minor plat process can continue to do that. And that's what's at risk, is that the number of those might pick up or go faster.
That's generally the risk, and it's not necessarily just sell. It could be just landowners wanting to subdivide.
But at the same time, we could be going through a complete review, but we're not negatively impacting anybody.
I mean,
Well, maybe landowners would say, would differ on that.
well,
but
no, I
don't
mean,
know.
we've had this moratorium in place.
Have you heard from anybody?
I heard from one person. And so that is why I think there is a reason to extend it a small amount of time to get more feedback from the citizens. Because when we have a moratorium and I hear from one person that doesn't want it, I feel like or vice versa. So I think doing the minor and major and having it end the moratorium for April 13th, if that's our target date, 60 days, I think people can tolerate that a little while. I don't think any of us want to go further than that for sure. But I think the other conversations are much deeper and it's going to be more complex. So the question is, do we just go ahead and stop open the moratorium and end it, and then?
If I may, Mr. Mayor and Council, we have a public hearing coming up next for that very purpose, to hear from the public
I know.
about any concerns about the extension of the moratorium. So not to cut off this conversation as to the merits, but as to whether to continue for consideration of the merits, it might be useful to see if there's a public outcry tonight or.
So is it fair to say that we already had this information for this item, that we can just kind of carry it out? Because they do kind of mirror.
Oh, absolutely.
forth.
So, and I think
Okay.
in fact, the resolution contemplates that you've been provided this information so that you have an understanding of what could happen going forward. But yes, I think you would end this item with no action coming from the council at this time, and you could proceed into the public hearing, and then you make a decision at that point about whether to extend the
But-
moratorium or
But
not.
Steve, do you have enough feedback through this presentation? Do you have enough council direction on this presentation, or will that take on the next item? You'll know where our direction is.
That is a fair question. I don't know that I have necessarily the direction that we need, because the direction we can get can be completely independent of the moratorium. You can direct staff to continue looking into all of this, both the preliminary plat issues and the major plat issues, without a moratorium in place. You could also tell us, we believe that everything we're seeing generally complies with the code of ordinances. And we don't see an issue, and we don't want you spending any more staff resources on this. So I would, if I could, and this is always that kind of sticky situation when we're not calling votes and things like that on these reports and presentations, but a general idea of whether or not you would like to see staff resources continuing on would be good. I may be able to split the baby on this, and I'll lean on legal counsel. Perhaps we could move into the hearing or the moratorium. You can hear from some of the public comments, and maybe that can help some of your thought process, if that's allowable.
Yes, absolutely. And I think following the public hearing, you'll need to make an affirmative vote on the moratorium and whether you're going to extend it or not. But you could also take a secondary vote on how you want to direct staff going forward based upon your decision on the moratorium.
I like that answer. Y'all good with that?
Mhm.
Okay, great. All right, no more reports and presentations, or that ends the public hearing, or no, that's no more reports and presentations. We'll now go into the public hearing. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Mayor, that public hearing item is consideration of a resolution of the City of Milton, Georgia, extending for up to 120 days a moratorium barring acceptance of minor subdivision plats with the AG1 zoning district that create any lot of less than 3 acres in size pursuant to the City of Milton Unified Development Code, Article, what is that, 12? Administration, Section 12-6, subdivision of land. It's agenda item number 26052. Our city attorney, Ms. Angela Davis.
Yes, so the
You can turn that in.
resolution
You can
that
go, you can skip to her. Sorry.
the resolution that's before you is to consider extension of the existing emergency moratorium that was in place pending the ability to run the notice and publication in the newspaper so that we can have a public hearing tonight to fully vet the concept of whether to extend. Under the terms of the moratorium, if you agree and decide you wish to adopt this resolution, it would provide for up to 120 days, which gets us to June 9th. But it provides specifically that that could be terminated at any time upon your additional vote. It could be extended if you so choose, and it could be adjusted as needed. So up to 120 days does not mean that it has to be in place for that long. And I think we already understand what it's barring. It would be barring the acceptance of minor plats for consideration of creating less than 3 acre lots. That's the limited basis of that. And then just one last thing I wanted to point out, for any plats that are currently in process with staff that have already been submitted, those would not be be included in this. They would be exempted, and they would be able to continue to be considered.
Thank you. All right, do we have any public comment?
We do, Mayor. We have 3.
Okay. Call the
And
first
Mayor, I
one.
would like to just make a quick reminder, speakers will have a total of 5 minutes. I will announce when 1 minute remains, and I will announce when time expires. I invite, and I am calling the speaker cards in which they were received, and Tony Rich, I invite you first to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tony Rich, 1960 Bethany Way, Milton, Georgia. Whenever I write my comments, when I have ideas and thoughts, I come in here and I write them up and I go, all right, I know what I'm going to say. And then when I listen to you guys talk, I'm like, well, I don't even know if I really need to read half the stuff. Because we're not allowed to participate in your discussions, my mind is all over the place. I mean, Councilmember Cookley, you've said 4 or 5 things that I just want to talk to you about right now. And then Councilmember Jacobus, you say some things and I go, ooh, I need to address that. And Mayor, you say some things, and City Manager says some things. And so I get to a point where I'm like, all right, I don't even know where to begin. But, I will say that I hope you extend this moratorium. I mean, that was the biggest message I wanted to request of you guys tonight, is that this is a big topic. It's huge. We first listened to discussion back in, I think, early December, and you were talking about, lot setbacks on 1 acre lots. And, there was a presentation or a request to reduce those setbacks. And, I heard a comment that said, well, if you're in the back of a subdivision, who cares how close the house is to the road? And you're right. If you're a half mile back in the middle of a big subdivision, I really don't care how close a person's house is to the road. But it goes so far beyond that. It's really, what do we want to encourage as a city when it comes to developing our land? This goes so far beyond property rights. I'm all about property rights. I mean, I own my own farm. I don't want you guys telling me how to handle it or what to do with it. But we've got to decide, do we want to protect the people that want to stay in Milton because we've decided to raise our family here and call this our home? Or do we really put the people that want to sell their land and leave Milton at a higher priority? And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because the older I get, a condo sounds more and more appealing. And, there are days I've got a huge water leak in my house I'm dealing with right now. And so there are days when I'm just ready to sell the farm and move. I say that somewhat in jest, but I love living in Milton, and everything about this town is different. We could have lived in Sandy Springs or Alpharetta or Roswell, but we didn't. We picked Milton because Milton is different. Everything our city government does, this is what I wrote down based on some of your comments. Everything you all do as a city government, you are inflicting or affecting a person's property rights in some fashion or another. You could decide to have 10-foot setbacks on all four sides and reduce the development standards to quarter-acre lots. And guess what? There are developers that would buy that property and they would love it. We could put sewer in Milton, and there are probably people that would applaud that decision. I'm not one of those people, but somebody would applaud it. And probably our property values would go up because the density numbers would go up, and people could put all kinds of development on that property. But I don't want that. I live here. We paid a lot of money for this farm, and I want to protect it. So I think you guys need to realize that everything you do, every piece of legislation that you fashion, in the words of Ken Gerard, and you approve in some way or fashion, is going to affect a person's property rights. Okay, maybe it protects our property rights because it keeps Milton different and it keeps it unique. Or maybe it reduces our property rights because the land's not worth as much. I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to think that if we could figure out a way to eliminate 1-acre lots in Milton, that my land would be worth more because it's different. And it's not Alpharetta, and it's not Roswell, and it's not Johns Creek, it's Milton. And if you want to move to Milton, you need to live on a big piece of land or go somewhere else. I mean, I know that sounds simple, and I know that's not something that you guys can so easily figure out, because the conversation started when we moved here 10 years ago, and it's still going on just as strong today as it was back then. I'll tell you something. Somebody that I know and respect wrote a letter years ago, and I'm going to read you a piece of that letter. It says, a number of years ago, Milton adopted the aura of green pastures and an equestrian lifestyle, whether you were part of it or just enjoyed living near it. It was a bold pronouncement for our little city's character. But in those same years, one pasture after another succumbed to development. Now there's a drumbeat for more amenities to service everyone. To do so would mean the loss over time and more of our character as Milton tilts towards sameness. I don't want to be the same as everybody else. I want you guys to figure out a way to keep us different. I've watched every single person in your group get elected, and not one person hasn't brought up equestrian heritage, rural lifestyle, and protecting all those things. And to sit here and worry about a person's property rights and to give up what makes Milton different, I think that'd be too bad. So
Time's expired.
please
Right on
please
cue.
extend the moratorium.
Right on cue.
Thank you all.
Next
Mayor,
speaker.
I invite Shannon Quidley to the podium, please.
Shannon Quidley, 1135 Next Road. I'm here in favor of extending the moratorium. I feel like there's just not enough public input. And I can just tell you guys from what I'm hearing as a citizen is no longer, oh my God, you live in Milton. It's so pretty out there. You live in Milton. Oh my God, have you seen those houses on Freemanville? Oh my God, y'all have such big houses. And I don't like that. I think we're kind of going backwards, and I think we need some more time and thoughtful effort in speaking to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
And our last speaker is Layla Hasanovic. Thought I had it, sorry.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Again, I wrote a little speech, but as I got to kind of listen to you all have some of the commentary and things like that, it seems like there's a continuous conversation about development and what about the selling and stuff, but it's more about like, what about us who live here, right? So I kind of wanted to just put some things together.
Quick 5 seconds, name and address.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Layla
okay.
Hasanovic, 2445 Mountain Road, Milton, of course. So good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Layla Hasanovic. I'm a homeowner in AG1 zoning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to urge council to vote in favor of extending the AG1 moratorium so that the staff has the time and space needed to properly evaluate subdivision standards and long-term impacts. This issue was brought forward by the staff for a reason, and it's important that we allow them adequate time to do this work thoughtfully and thoroughly and without pressure from pending applications. The second point I want to emphasize is AG1 itself. Keeping larger lots and preserving land is why we live here. AG1 is not simply a residential designation. It exists to protect open land, rural character, and working agricultural uses. Once that land is subdivided and fragmented, those qualities are permanently lost. I live on Mountain Road, which is defined by large parcels, limited road capacity, and rural infrastructure. Incremental subdivision in areas like this change how the land functions, affecting traffic safety, drainage, tree canopy, long-term land continuity. These impacts accumulate quickly and cannot be reversed. Once it's done, it's done. I'm also a beekeeper, like many residents in Milton. Beekeeping and other agricultural uses depend on space. Milton's zoning code recognizes this by allowing agricultural uses and livestock in AG1 with required setbacks, including significant distance from neighboring properties and occupied structures. As lots become smaller and closer together, those uses become increasingly constrained and incompatible, not because they're mismanaged, but because the land pattern no longer supports them. Protecting AG1 protects more than lot size. It protects land stewardship, pollinators, and agricultural character that Milton has intentionally preserved. Extending the moratorium allows staff and council to ensure that future decisions continue to support that intent rather than eroding it one approval at a time. I respectfully ask you to extend the moratorium and reaffirm your commitment to land preservation and thoughtful planning. Again, thank you for your time, and I do agree with the other homeowners that mentioned. I don't think that there's enough public input from the city, and with this extension, hopefully, it'll allow me to make sure that I get everyone at least to be able to make some sort of commentary, whether it's one way or another. So allowing that would enable me to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes public comment for this item.
Okay. Is it fair to say that if council would like to extend the moratorium, we do it in a shorter time frame? I think I've kind of gathered that.
Kind of feel that's right.
So, Steve, knowing that, give me, because I think it's important for the community to understand when it's going to end and make sure we communicate. Give me the timelines again on one path, two paths, and what staff's going to do in the meantime.
I can tell you
Try.
that, I can tell you the preliminary, the minor plat, our goal is to have that across the finish line by April 13th. As long as we meet that objective, and that April 13th is the shortest possible critical path within the zoning procedure law and everything that we need to do here in the city.
You mean present on that and vote on that night?
It would be before the council at that point.
Whether to dissolve that procedure in lieu of the other procedure.
Correct. And, there are some variables there. We've compressed this so much. If the planning commission determines they want to defer something, that could push things off. But, and perhaps a little bit of a cushion there would be of value. However, I could tell you from a staff perspective, we can have that work done for April 13th.
So, question, how do we set expectations with your call to the public to get involved? How do we set expectations on what we can legally do and we can't legally do? Like, I can appreciate people don't want, and it's a fair comment, such big houses. But then how do we, what's the criteria then for having smaller houses. And what would that be that we would have to do, or our hands tied? I think that needs to be, otherwise people are going to come in with an expectation that all of a sudden people aren't going to be building big houses on 1 acre lots, and they're going to be sorely disappointed that if they meet the criteria in the code, that we can't do anything about that. So I don't want to have a bunch of false things out there. I want it to be very realistic. On the other hand, if we have the opportunity on any of these lots to improve the view shed, to do other things, and we just need to understand, and the public needs to understand, what's our latitude. If they're coming in to lobby, what are we able to do? What are they able to lobby and be for, and what is just not going to fly? Because I'm not exactly sure either. With a wave of my hand and my wand, I'd like to roll it back when I got here in 97. I mean, it's painful. So.
That was a lot of questions in that.
And I'm not going to tell her where I was in 1997 either.
I tried to keep track of them as you were going. I think I might be able to generally answer it. I think in light of also what we've heard tonight, and in light of the very limited and unscientific approach to our survey, and let's face it, we identified a group of stakeholders that, that it was decent stakeholder analysis, but then we handpicked representatives from them who we could send that out to. I think we need to open that up quite a bit. I think we need to hear from more citizens, not handpicked by staff. I think we probably should have some open forums for people to come and speak, and we could structure those around what could and could not be done. One of the conversations that we had, it harkens back to when we did the tree canopy ordinance, and there are some people here who were on that committee with me. And we looked at it through 3 lenses. And one of the lenses was to ensure we don't unnecessarily impact homeowners and landowners. And I think that should be one of the lenses that we look at through this, because they're an important part. In fact, I'm embarrassed that I went to builders and developers before I went to homeowners when I answered your question earlier. Landowners. Landowners, though we heard from a few tonight, there's all those pink parcels you saw on that map earlier are all landowners. And there's more than that too, because we have much larger landowners throughout the city as well that aren't represented on there. And I think we need to hear from them.
So, okay, but what are we going to do so that people know what we can and can't do? Instead of pie in the sky and then they're angry, like, we have to have some documentation so that everybody who comes to the podium doesn't have a set of expectations over here that we can't touch.
I think from a problem-solving standpoint, we look at what outcome you're looking to achieve. And if it's the outcomes that we talked about tonight, we talk about some of those tools instead of speaking in generalities. I don't want to see the property develop next to me. What does that look like? I don't want to see a property develop right next to me. I want to go back to that picture. You don't have to go back to pictures, but if you remember the one where they were talking about side setbacks, that's an actual situation that we're dealing with right now. And that's a resident who has an extraordinarily large home being built behind her. And because it fronts inside the new subdivision, which is a large lot subdivision, the side setback is only 25 feet. So what she's looking at, and I can't really see through that picture.
You can see it.
It's enormous, and that's while it's part of the house, and it can be considered almost an accessory, but it is part of the home. So I think that we need to talk about what outcomes we're looking for and structure that in a manner so people can give feedback on realistic strategies.
Okay, so what would you say to people because half of your respondents, I guess that's what, 13 people said,
12 and a
the
half.
houses are too big. Okay, so then I think there should be something specific people are able to lobby for. I mean, we can't wave that wand and say you have to build a smaller house if you meet the criteria. Are we saying that we are open to changing the criteria? We can go with more impervious services. I got it on the third time. Let the record show.
I'm tracking.
I think that would go contrary, more impervious surface unless it was, unless you're improving the ratio would be contrary to what we're talking about. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, help me with that.
Let me sleep on this. Let us sleep on this.
Okay.
This has been a tremendous amount of work getting up to this point.
Right.
Maybe we can reconvene tomorrow morning and we can brainstorm a little bit about some of the things that have been brought to us. And I could probably better answer your question.
Because I think the easy button is that 5X, right? That's the more easy thing. And I
Is that
think,
the 2 pass? Is that what you're
yes.
talking about? Okay.
And then the first one is going to be the much more complex community. I mean, a lot of input that needs to be had. So the vote tonight is, do we extend the moratorium, period, right? And I think is the thinking, Steve, that will be lifted on April 13th? Because I think that's council wants to know, when's this moratorium going to end first?
Barring, we can't control what other bodies do.
Right.
Assuming that we're able to move through the zoning procedure law process, the time as we have them laid out, we can have this done by April 13th. I can't control for those other variables.
Okay. So tonight it's going to be 120 days, but our intention is hopefully we'll lift it on April 13th, and then we'll go through the process of, y'all will come back before us numerous times with what y'all are thinking along the way, as far as all the menu of criteria that's going to be involved in a much longer process. Is that correct? Is that fair? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Though correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, I don't know that you need to say 120 days right now.
Oh, okay.
It could be up to, it's up to 120 days, but if you decide we don't care about the process, if it gets delayed, we're not willing to go beyond X amount of days.
Okay.
I think you could do that tonight.
Right. As drafted currently, as proposed, is up to 120 days. But if you complete the process by April 13th and everything goes along exactly as slated and planned, then you would vote to terminate the moratorium at the same time, or you could.
Okay.
So
If they decided that we're not willing, regardless of what happens, to go beyond 90 days, or at least have another hearing at that point, they can do that as well tonight too.
you
correct?
could, but just remember the same bind that we got in while we had to have the little two things is if you decide it and it's less than the time needed to get. So if we say it's going to end April 13th and you decide end of March that, oh gosh, you know what, we're not going to be ready. Well, then we're going to have this other problem because we would not be able to get it advertised. You have to have at least a minimum of 15 days prior to the public hearing to be able to extend it. And this concept of the public hearings to extend moratoriums, if that seems kind of counterintuitive, I can understand that it may. But the idea is, and under the case law, is once you have a moratorium in for more than a very, very brief emergency period, which we have equated to about 30 days, then it's a zoning decision in and of itself because it's a no zoning. So because of that, you have to go through the ZPL process. And that means at least an advertisement 15 days in advance and a public hearing. So
We're actually 30 days. We haven't
Oh, do you
changed
do
our code
30 in your
yet.
code?
We're-
Okay.
It's about to change, but we're still at 30.
okay, so then that even makes it harder. So you would have to decide, by the beginning of March, which is a couple of weeks, that you're not going to make your deadline, or else you would be in that little, quagmire again. So giving yourself the leeway up to 120 days gives you the flexibility. You can cut it off anytime sooner. But of course, to your point, if no matter what happens, you're ending the process, whether you've accomplished anything or not, then you can certainly shorten it tonight.
Can you do special called meetings with our committees in order to expedite the process?
And
done it
I want you to
before.
confirm that I just made a correct statement too, but is it still 30 days? It is still 30 days.
Yes.
And did some of that process include special called meetings?
It did for first presentation before council, and that is piggybacking off of going right out of the planning commission into submitting the packet for first presentation. So that's a very compressed timeline from when planning commission would hear it to when it needs to be submitted to then be on first presentation. And first presentation would need to be a special called, again, because of the spring break, how it fits in April. Pull that slide back up.
All right, let's see here. March 24th. 13th.
Basically, March is fair play to schedule meetings and do whatever. Is that fair? I mean, it's,
Does council want to, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's not easy, but does council want to extend it for 120 days, let the flexibility? Or do y'all want a hard end on April 13th? And
but
We do- if
we can re-up on it.
we can always re-up it. I don't know if you want to give it maybe another week or something, maybe just a little buffer.
Well, the 90 days in having the discussion we just had
Oh.
does give me a moment of pause, because we're going to need to know within a couple of weeks of whether or not we're going to be able to meet that April 13th deadline. And we're not going to know that because it won't be before the Planning Commission yet. So we risk a delay at the Planning Commission point because we won't have advertised in time. Now, we could advertise it and then just never do it, right? We could just go ahead and advertise within the appropriate deadline, and then when that date comes up, you decide what you want to do. That could hedge that.
Is it fair to say we can also lift it at any point in time too?
Absolutely. It says that on its own terms.
Okay, so we
What
can.
was it that
do
we
the
rolled
120
over
days
and
and
over and
lift it
over?
whenever.
COVID?
Lift it when we need to.
There were a few moratoriums that we, quite a while ago, that we had rolled.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like the flexibility with the full intent of lifting it on April 13th.
I think that's kind of what I'm.
We don't know what we don't know. If,
That's right.
to your point, if there's a board or a committee that
Can't meet.
curveball, we can't anticipate what we don't
Correct.
know.
Yeah. We're putting too much
Have that-
pressure on ourselves. Let's get the
Exactly.
extended time. If we can bring it in, let's bring it in.
Exactly.
Right? Get the right input. Feels right.
Okay, let's do it.
Shoot.
I think the 120 days would be the safest, with the understanding we plan on getting this to you by April 13th, and with the understanding you could end this moratorium tomorrow.
All right, yeah, fair enough. All right, any other council discussion?
So what's the time period?
It's
120
currently
days.
stated as up to 120 days.
If we just
unless-
approve the agenda item as is, then we're good to go. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep, go.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we approve agenda item number 26-052.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Cookerly and a second from Councilmember Dolan to approve agenda item number 26-052. Doug, you good?
He's asleep.
He's gone.
I'm not asleep. I'm totally paying attention.
Okay. Just- I meant to call on you before we placed the vote, so I apologize.
Hey, my vote had hit before
Okay.
Councilmember Kramer's did.
Thank you. All right, that motion passes 6-1. Thank you. Okay, since there are no items under zoning agenda, unfinished business or new business, does council have anything to report on? Staff, anything?
We do not.
Okay, with that, I'll have a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion from Haney, second from Johnson. All in favor, please place your votes. That passes unanimously. Thank you.